panelists. Dr. Jason Neiffer is the executive director of Montana Digital Academy. Jason told me I should think about a knife when I said his name, so I would say it right. Executive director of Montana Digital Academy, Montana State Virtual School. A former social studies teacher, he has spent his career working towards balancing technology-infused learning and research-driven pedagogy to find ways to build what's next in classroom environments. Megan Van Buskirk, which I understand is Megan from the Church in the Woods. That's what I understood, is what her name means, is the Director of Quality Assurance at Holistic Learning Solutions and a teaching assistant at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. With over 15 years of experience in traditional and digital curriculum, instruction, and innovation, Megan is passionate about pioneering solutions that lead to successful learning outcomes for diverse learners. Rob Gibson, to her right, is currently the Dean of Instructional Technology and Academic Support and Director of Instructional Design at Wichita State University Campus of Applied Science and Technology. Academic names are so long. He was an early adopter of AI, building chatbots using IBM Watson and Microsoft Azure technologies. He has taught professional development courses for EDUCAUSE on AI for the past 2 years. His expertise is on the intersection of AI and accessibility support. And finally, last but not least, Dr. Siobahn Grady is Program Director and an Assistant Professor of Information Science at the School of Library and Information Sciences at North Carolina Central University. Notably, she heads the Laboratory for Artificial Intelligence and Equity Research, co-directs the Center for Data Equity, co-leads the university's AI Working Group, is an Office e-learning and Office of Faculty and Professional Development Faculty Fellow at NCCU. Okay, and co-facilitates the University of North Carolina System Faculty Learning Community on generative AI in teaching and learning. Clearly, we have a panel of folks with a lot of knowledge and expertise in the area, and I look forward to turning this over to Roxana to lead it away. And I'm going to walk this way. I like it.
Thank you, Deb, for those great introductions. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up at this late hour, and hopefully we'll keep you alert and engaged with all the fantastic information that you're going to be receiving from the panelists. I'd like to kick it off by asking a question to the audience. How many of you are very confident in the use of AI? A decent number of you. How about those of you who feel like you've dabbled in it and have somewhat of an understanding, a little bit more? How many of you are really interested in learning more and could use a bit more support and help and guidance and in the use of AI overall? Okay, great. So I feel like most of the people are kind of somewhere in the middle there. I think that this is going to be really fantastic to hear these experts talk about the role of AI. And I'd like to kick it off by asking a question to the panelists. What is the role or roles that generative AI could play in the lives of students and educators?
Ooh, you're looking at me. Does my mic work well? Okay. I think that there's a lot of responses on what it's like in the lives of faculty members. So I want to start by talking about what it's like for me as a student. So generative AI for me is huge because as we all know, when you're in a doctoral program, you have about 40 to 80 articles to read for each one of your courses. And so a lot of those readings are incredibly dense. And I think a lot of us get imposter syndrome and we want to know how well are we learning what we're learning. And so one thing I really like to do is to upload all of my articles and quiz myself and say, can you give me a multiple choice quiz on how well I understand this content? And sometimes some fill in the blank question and answers. And so that really is validating for me as a student to make sure that I'm getting through some very dense content. I know that a lot of my peers use it, as a language model to make their writings more succinct for discussion posts. So really using it as a peer consultant to help you study, to help you brush up on your language. And then I would say from the vantage point of a faculty member, the thing that's been most valuable for me as a faculty member is to provide customized feedback for learners. And I know you must be thinking, customized? How can a language model provide customized feedback? That would be incredibly generic. But this was something I actually started about a year and a half ago as an associate professor of English. And I would put in specific prompts that I had customized, and I would want to touch on specific things in somebody's essay, about their thesis statement, or maybe about their parenthetical citations or their counter arguments. And I would say, generate this particular comment to Rob, and I want to use this kind of a tone and this kind of a closing. And I actually got feedback from learners that this is the most customized feedback I've ever received in my life. It's not phoned in like all of the other professors here. So if used and wielded wisely by the student, by the faculty member, it's a very powerful tool.
Nicely said. Anybody else, please?
Is it working? Hey, it is. I think asking what impact generative AI will have on teachers and students is a lot like asking in 1994 what the impact of the internet will be on teachers and students. And in the same way that the internet is unrecognizable 30 years later after it started making an appearance in both higher education and K-12 classrooms, I think what we're seeing today is really very low function in comparison to what I think is about to come and really hit the information world a bit like a tsunami. And I think a lot of the panic you're hearing right now, it very much echoes the 30-year ago panic about the internet. Like, what happens if people get access to all the information in the world at one click? And won't the world be a much better place? And then social media came, and who knows what happened. But I think that the big difference between what is happening to teaching and learning in an era dominated by AI is that we didn't really take a lot of lessons of the internet and hold them dear to ourselves in shifting the model of how we teach and learn. And AI is moving so much faster than the internet did. We had a decade, maybe even a decade and a half to come to terms with what the internet brought. All of us are in the room today because internet-driven instruction became a viable model to deliver teaching and learning to students in vast geographical areas. I come from Montana, a country the size of Germany with 1/80th of population. And if you want to take a course on chemistry in Busby, Montana, which no one in here has heard from before, except these three ladies I brought with me from Montana, then the internet's a good place to do that. And I think that what is about to happen is probably going to drop our jaws, that it is going to fundamentally change how teaching and learning works. And one of the reasons why I think every teacher, every professor, every instructional designer, every administrator, every student needs to be starting to wrap their brain around this is because if we don't drive this narrative, the narrative moving so quickly and there's so much money driving AI technologies that I think it may drive in a direction that those that truly care about students learning and the importance of learning to democracy, we're not going to like where it goes. And so my advocacy in this space is really all about we need to be involved in these conversations because we as the experts, and you are a room full of experts, have to be driving this conversation.
Well said. Siobahn?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
So what is the role or the roles of generative AI, and how could that play a part in the lives of students or educators?
Yes, so I agree with what both of my colleagues have stated here. However, I view AI as a tool. And in addition to what he's saying, I don't think it's going to move as fast as we think it is because we still live in a world where we have the digital divide. Everybody still doesn't have access to technology or know how to properly use it. I think what we're going to expand to is, I don't want it to be this way, but maybe more of the have and the have-nots, where a certain group of individuals are really well-versed and know how to utilize the technology while others may be left behind. And so what I want to see in this space, you heard that I have a lab about equity. I would love to see more programming geared towards everyone to learn about this. And just think about your mothers or grandmothers in the room. Are they using AI chatbots? Probably not. No, and I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being sincere. this is what I'm saying about everybody still doesn't know its capabilities or its power. But what I see AI doing is becoming a tool that can help all of us hopefully become more efficient and productive if used properly. But we do need to have some considerations, particularly some ethical considerations on how we can utilize this technology more responsibly. Because if it's not used well, you all have seen hopefully about deep fakes and all these other things out here. People won't really know what's real and what's not. And so that is also a concern as well.
I think you touch on a really
Mhm.
important point there, equitability. I mean, I think about faculty that I work with, and some of them are just not as digitally fluid as younger generations who aren't really scared of playing around with these AI tools. And so we want our faculty and our ID who maybe maybe are more tenured to be able to feel comfortability in being able to use those tools. And also you spoke to something I think that's really important too, in terms of how cost prohibitive some of these tools can be. You know, you have to pay a subscription, and how accessible is that to all of our students, all of our instructional designers, all of our faculty? So
Yeah.
I think those are very, very important points to be thinking about in, you know, the future of being able to utilize these tools in a more equitable way and keeping ethics in mind as well. You really beautifully said. Rob, would you like to comment on that?
Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. I think I'll answer that question using a couple of different short vignettes, if I may. We are in the process of preparing for a couple of in-services. Anybody here do in-services anymore? Is that a thing? A couple of people. It's kind of some community colleges and some technical colleges still do that, kind of a legacy thing. So we're preparing for an in-service, and I serve on administration, and my co-administrators are still sort of reverting back to the incumbent model of how to prepare our faculty for, sort of training. We work with a lot of faculty that come from industry and they don't have the traditional sort of pedagogical background. So they were wanting to do a whole day of in-service on, brace yourself, on writing lesson plans. And they were going to use an incumbent model to do that, just 6 hours of teaching them how to do lesson planning. I realized the importance of that, but I showed them that I could actually develop a lesson plan using Magic School AI in about 5 seconds. So, it seems to me that we're not attacking this problem correctly. If it were me, I mean, it's not my call. I'm not a vice president. I'm just a dean. But the vice presidents, what they should be doing is teaching the faculty how to use these tools to do a critical analysis of it, to learn how to map their outcomes, their program level, their course level, their module level outcomes, the state regulations and accreditation requirements, pull all that together into these tools and do a critical analysis of the output and then modify the output and tweak it. Wouldn't that be a better use of time than 6 hours of lesson plan development? Because actually what it can produce is much, much better. And the second thing, I'll be brief, I'm teaching in a pre-service education program, and it seems to me to be sort of introspective, almost malfeasance on my part as a faculty member to not prepare these students to be able to understand and use these tools. I embrace AI. I encourage them to use these tools in the assignments that they produce. I actually show them how to do it. Now, some of you may, be a little uneasy about that, but I think that they're going to get exposed to it one way or another. I mean, it's just a matter of time. So is it going to be me that helps guide them in the ethical bias considerations and questions, or is it going to be just what they learn kind of on their own? I would rather be the person that sort of is the steward in that conversation and helps them to be able to guide and use these tools to pick the right tool and to be able to use these tools ethically. So I think that is incumbent upon us to be able to teach our students how to use these tools ethically and responsibly. That's my opinion.
That's great. I just had a meeting with the CEO of our university before this, and he was saying, in a meeting with myself and our provost, it would be foolish to think that our students are not using
Right.
AI, but it's really about teaching them to use AI responsibly and to be competitive in the market too, to actually know how to use these tools. So I think that that's, really right on, the nail right on the head. So next question I have for the panel is educator Jose Bowen has referred to AI as the new C student. How can educators, institutions, and in turn QM help students develop the critical thinking, creativity, and adaptability needed to excel beyond what AI can achieve?
I am happy to jump in. And before I address this particular prompt, I want to go back to such an important point that you made, Siobahn, which is that we have been inundated with generative AI at this conference, and it's been wonderful, and we're all going to learn more. But we are very much sitting in a place of privilege. And I think you brought up such a great point with that, because if we think just of socioeconomic status and the amount of our students who still do not have reliable internet or devices, and the amount of learners who maybe have some shame in asking financial aid for devices, we have to think just because our lives are inundated with that, and we might feel expert or intermediate with these tools and technologies, there is going to be a struggle and a divide with that. So thank you so much for bringing that up. In terms of this particular question, I have a very simple answer, and then I'm going to turn it over to the other panelists here. I really appreciate your example from earlier, Jason, because yes, there was a panic in the 90s over the internet, and I think back to the 1970s with the calculator and the math classroom. And really the answer to technology, we panic over it, but the answer is always the same. We don't want to incorporate the tool, but students are going to use the tool, and the answer is going to be show your work. So we ask the learners in the math classroom, show me your work. I want to prove that you're not just using a calculator. I want to know you can do it manually. In terms of the internet, I want to know that you're not Googling. I'm going to find a way to make sure that you can show your work. And the answer is that in terms of generative AI usage as well. And if we do it properly, and if we form our assessments or our activities in a way where we say, I want to see your raw thinking, then I want to see how you utilize generative AI to improve your thinking, and I want to see those side by side, then we can still maintain the integrity, avoid plagiarism, keep up with academic honesty, and still allow students to keep up with those critical thinking skills that they need.
I wanted to add to that. We are not at a place yet where AI can do what we do. It is not innovative. Remember, these are tools that are taking in information that has been fed to them. So the innovation and ingenuity we have, it's not there yet. So it can't replace us. We should encourage our students to have that innovation and creative mindset and let them know that the AI is not better than them. It is how they use the AI to improve, as she said, what they're already doing. So we just need to keep that in mind. AI still to this day requires human oversight. It is not without that, okay?
I would add to that I'm not entirely sure we're teaching critical thinking as much as we should K through higher ed. And the evidence I have for that is syllabi that are dominated by knowledge level acquisition, very little application in taking that knowledge and doing something with it. And there have been studies to suggest that that 97% of people think of themselves as critical thinkers. I don't really want to meet the 3% that self-identify as non-critical thinkers, but we all think we think critically, and yet we have a problem in the United States and a global problem with people that easily fall for mis and disinformation and are not engaged in important elements of our political, social, and cultural problems that we face in the world. And so I think that it's not the direct answer to what do we do about AI, but I do think that we need to have an important educational conversation. It has to be at all levels, and it's where is critical thinking being taught? Is it something that we're evaluating? Is it something that we're measuring? We certainly don't measure critical thinking in testing regimes in K-12. There is very little assessment of critical thinking, especially in typical colleges and universities in the application process. Proving you're a critical thinker hasn't really been a part of this. And in fact, if anything, we have somewhat non-informative methods of judging success and judging competency. And if we continue to the way we've been going about this for decades now, we're not training students to be in a world that is dominated by generative AI tools. And there's a lot of folks in the business space, they're saying things like AI won't replace humans. It's humans using AI that will ultimately get these jobs. And the humans using AI will be notably more effective, will be notably more efficient, and more importantly, I think more creative and successful because they have taken a tool set, they keep the critical thinking that you're talking about and the creativity, the human creativity that you're talking about, and use these tools to both expand and using the challenge themselves to think differently. And I have strong concerns that we haven't been really preparing for this for a couple decades now. But I don't think it's too late. We can do something about this, but I think it's going to require a lot of critical conversations. And I'm almost certain that most of our colleagues aren't going to like these conversations, but that doesn't mean we don't have to have them.
Let me turn the tables around here a bit. By show of hands, how many of you in this audience are involved somehow, intersect somehow with the humanities? Show of hands. Raise them high. Okay. How many of you who have your hands up are concerned about the academic integrity and bias and ethical concerns around this with your assignments for students? Keep your hands up. A couple real high. Okay. Good. All right. Not all of you, but a fair number. I follow some, and I know Megan does too. We follow some people on LinkedIn who are, teaching the humanities, or professoriate in the humanities, teach English classes. I would encourage you to look to that resource and look to some of those people, and we'd be happy to share their names. They've really tackled this problem sort of head on. They don't come at it from an academic integrity, a punitive perspective, right? So they've already sort of, I think, reconciled the fact that the students are going to probably use these tools. They're probably going to default to that, whether we like it or not. And I don't care what you say, these plagiarism detector things are garbage. They do not work. Don't waste your money on them. Easy to beat. Ball State had an article for students on how to beat them. So don't even waste your time. So one of the faculty members I follow who teaches at Georgia Perimeter, she indicates that she teaches English, full professor, and what she indicates that she does is that she actually has the students, she asks them to use one of the large language models to produce some of the assignments, but then they have to go back and actually do a critical analysis of that and look at the output of it and figure out how to tune the prompts or how to tune the information to get a better output from those models. So she's actually leaning into the technology, if you will, and actually using it to her advantage. She knows they're going to use it. So why not take advantage of it, actually teach them how to use it properly, and teach them how to tune their prompt and be able to use the tool to the greatest efficacy.
I was just going to ask, how do we systematize that? I mean, I think that's a great approach, but how do we systematize this?
I'm sorry, what?
How do we systematize this? Like, how do we, I mean, I think that's a great approach, but everything I read seems to suggest that the vast majority of response in K-12 and higher ed is the academic honesty piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
How do we take our colleagues that are doing amazing things in this space and systematize it, make it the expectation that systems are AI forward or at least AI acknowledging?
Tough for me.
I do have an initial thought, which is that it has to be a part of your innovation goals as an institution, and it has to be baked into your strategic plan and your guiding principles, and it has to align then with how you're going to map out your programs and down to your courses and integrating those technologies, and could also be a part of doing internal university course reviews and just audits of your technology. I think if technology and innovation, research, and staying abreast of trends is important to you as an institution, then you need to be very specific about what that means, and you need to support it, offer faculty development, staff development for that, also hold others accountable and evaluate that. That's how I think we could do that.
I want to add to that. That is not wrong. but I teach artificial intelligence, and just think about our legislators. Are they making laws against AI and technologies? No. Why isn't it important at that level? Because from there, usually things trickle down. So I think we have to start reaching out to our legislators to see what they're doing about AI, because this is something that impacts everyone, not just our institutions. So you're right in what you're saying, but I see a problem higher up.
Absolutely. It's going to be another case of, just as with digital education, continuing to tell the story, gaining champions, and pushing to change compliance and getting that baked into our curriculum.
Can I just jump just real quick? There was an excellent panel. I don't know if sure if they're in the audience. Raise your hands if you are. The young ladies from Idaho. Are you here in the audience somewhere from the Idaho Virtual School? Okay. I don't know if anybody catch that panel. There were 7 of them on the stage. It was outstanding. They really, I think, sort of decompressed and deconstructed some of these concerns. A lot of them were English teachers, and they were talking about some of the frameworks that they have put into place to help provide some guardrails around this. And I was intrigued because they work at the case, in some cases, the K-6 level. And so it's, it's already down at that level, right? We think about college, but it's actually the grade school kids are actually using these tools too. And so they've really put up some nice boundaries, some framework around this through, and I think that that's our future, by the way. I think that we're going to have to kind of roll with this. I think we're going to have to build policy framework structures for our students. And I am a strong advocate for, I think there needs to be an introductory course for every student at every campus on the ethical use of artificial intelligence. You have to work with this and not come at this with a big old hammer and beat them up over it. That's the way I feel like.
Great. So, I mean, I think that most of you touched on some of this based on, this idea of how to maybe systematize these things and how academic honesty might play a part. But I would love to know, what are some of the most pressing issues that you see for institutions regarding AI?
I'll do a very practical one. It's purchasing. We are a K-12 institution on a higher ed campus, and like many of your higher education institutions and some of your K-12 too, that there are all these rules that didn't exist 5 years ago. So you can't just go up to flippertygib@gpt.com and give them your credit card number, and they have to have an SOC2 and various documents now before we're able to purchase. And because of that, I know of many institutions that can't even adopt exploratory ChatGPT licensing because it's not able to fit either university or statewide tests. And what that means is that one of two things is happening. Either people are paying for it on their own to be able to experiment, and that happens to include me. I don't want to tell you how many subscriptions I have right now. But more importantly, it also means that a lot of people are being pushed to the free versions, which have no data protections, which have no promises to not train off of your data. And you couple that with relatively little training about what happens when you stick something in a large language model and what's training off of it and what's not. I think it's a somewhat of a smoldering fire underneath the surface of this, and it's very practical. But and I also know that very few institutions right now are rolling in AI dough to be able to adopt campus-wide this or that, right? But I think that very practical issue is challenging a lot of institutions to even play with a couple of these tools, because they don't know who to contact at Anthropic to buy Claude with a check. So those types of issues, I think, are very important and underappreciated.
I want to add to that, if I may ask a question, how many of your institutions, if you can just show of hands, have a committee on AI, or you have a statement written? Okay, I don't see enough hands up. That's a problem right there. So at North Carolina Central University, we have a AI working group. I think that's also a first step, just who is managing this thing called AI, and who's keeping track of everything that's happening with it. So I would encourage those of you who didn't raise your hand, which was quite a few, to investigate that. And maybe you're a person who wants to start that initiative. And even if you don't know everything, you have a community right here of people who you can reach out to. So I would encourage you to take that back to your institutions to get the conversation started. And at least you and your colleagues at your institution can start having those tough conversations about, what is our policy on AI? How are we going to facilitate the use of it, and all of those great things that need discussions?
Well, I think this is a great question, and the other panelists have really teed up well a resource that we're going to provide at the end of this panel. I think one of the biggest challenges of implementation of AI at an institution is really the political climate and understanding what's really happening. An example that I will give is that for the institutions that maybe do have these committees, I will give a use case without any identifying information. One particular institution decided it was going to create some subgroups for an AI committee. And one group was supposed to work on faculty development, one was supposed to work on AI for instructional design solutions. And so there were several different groups that were supposed to meet regularly, put time and investment into this. The problem is when they would get together, they weren't sure what they should do, who should be in charge, what was going on, and there was not a lot of support at the executive level. And in some cases, executive leaders were in these committees and they weren't even sure which direction to take it. And so I think what's an interesting phenomena that I'm seeing is that we want to have the appearance, the facade that we're at the forefront of generative AI. We'll dip our toe into the bathwater, but we want all of the glory and none of the risk. So we don't want to be the first institution to fail and piss a bunch of people off. We don't want to do anything illegal, but we want to look like we're being really innovative and at the forefront. So that's very unfortunate. I think there needs to be some structure around that. And I think between all of the minds on this stage, we have a pretty good starter document that we can hand out at the end of this for you to get started with AI responsibly at your institution, considering all of these things.
Boy, those are tough responses to follow, but I'll try. Like many of you, we are in the process of trying to spin up a committee that's going to help to shape some of the policy. At the same time, as Megan indicated, I think simultaneous to that, almost in parallel, you have to be thinking about subcommittees or whatever governance structure you have that helps to sort of upskill and reskill your faculty with some of these technologies. And I would implore you that this has to be a very informed, very deliberate cross-curricular committee. The composition of the committee needs to really kind of cut across a broad swath of the campus. You need to include the librarians. They're a critical voice in this. Instructional designers, faculty, students have to be a part of this as well. So it really has to be a broad curricular swath of people who are represented, have a voice at the table to help sort of structure what that looks like. And that committee, as far as I'm concerned, will never sunset. The policy committee may. Once you kind of get some guidance in place, not much more to do. But those ongoing conversations about how you start to build this into the curriculum, what this looks like, how you use these tools, I don't see that ever really sunsetting and going away.
I love this.
Can I add one thing to that too?
Please.
I'm sorry, but in my bio, you heard all the things. So in North Carolina, we have a system, and my university is a part of 16 institutions that are in that system. I also co-lead one of the system level AI groups as well. And that's where all the universities have representation to come and meet as well, which is great because we're all able to take information back to our institutions. So take a look and see if what state you're in, if you have a system or if your university is in the system, look to see what they're doing about it as well, because that's where the decisions are really made.
That's fantastic. I
Mhm.
think that not only have you identified some issues that are pressing, but also some potential solutions. So that way we can take this back to our home institutions and start thinking about working with these ideas. It's brilliant. Okay, so next question here. would be how can AI be integrated into QM, specifically rubrics and PD, to enhance course design while maintaining high standards of quality assurance that QM upholds? Should AI be part of that process?
You should have come to making a nice session earlier today. We were talking all about that.
Yeah, I would love to jump right into that. So something that I've been doing as a project privately is building some custom GPTs that are aligned with the quality matter standards for the 7th edition. Of course, this is something that I'm not sharing out, and am keeping that project in alignment with QM headquarters so that they're aware of what I'm doing and that I'm not disseminating anything. But I think we have a real opportunity for integrating AI into the rubric and to make things a little bit more granular and to make it a little bit more hands-on. We've heard a lot of words today. Penny Raustenberg's out there in the audience somewhere. She likes to call her generative AI her intern. I like to call it my consultant, but you know, generative AI in the terms of quality matters can really be, you know, a peer reviewer as well, right? So this is somebody that you can, well, I'm referring to generative AI as somebody. This is a tool that you can use and really you know, bounce ideas back and forth with a custom GPT that's going to bake in those standards. And so that's something that I've worked on with the specific review standards. I know Rob has done some work on that. And I think, Jason, you've done some work as well. So I'm a big advocate for that. I think it can help us streamline, because all of you out there, I know there's a ton of peer reviewers out here. You know how long it takes to do a course review. You know it's tiresome. And I bet there's a bunch of type A personalities out here as well. And you want to be really thorough about checking every stick of course content so that your review is very good. So it would help to have a tool to streamline that, I think.
I would add to that and in fact, I'm doing a session that's somewhat like this tomorrow, which I will also be talking about custom GPTs. But part of my line here is that if all AI brings us is faster, right, that's really a race to the bottom. And I'm not sure if I quite agree with AI as a C student. I think it's really hit that 3.0 level now. So it's a B student now for sure. And every time you add in another tool that allows it to pull from a finite piece of information, retrieval augmented generation, as it's called, or RAG, then suddenly now, if you're pulling in good sources, you're getting better outcomes. And that's part of what my session will be on tomorrow. But the bottom line is that if our goal isn't better, then I think we're misusing AI. And that doesn't mean that we can't do things like quicken the course development process, or quicken the review process, or add in expertise that your organization would have never had anyways, right? I know there's a lot of instructional designers in the room that are overworked and underpaid and under budgeted. And for you, I think it's, again, not just a question of faster. It's instead of, working on 10 courses in a year, which would be quite bold, but 10 courses in a year that you do a pretty good job at. I don't think the goal should be to now do 20 courses with AI. It should be to do your 10 courses really, really, really well, because we're on the verge of having tool sets that if you set them up correctly, if you give it parameters, if you learn how it works, you can actually create much, much, much better outcomes than if you were either writing from scratch or you were simply using AI as some kind of prompting back and forth. If AI technology stopped developing right now and we had no further developments, I think it would certainly revolutionize the creation of content. But since it's not, and it's highly unlikely that we're going to hit a brick wall functionality, imagine in 1, 3, 5 years what you could do to really create outstanding output that you can add in factors like student factors and cultural adaptations and learning style. I don't like learning styles, never mind. Weird group to say that in front of, but learning preferences, and the fact that Notebook LM can produce a 20-minute kind of goofy sounding podcast to explain anything to you based on a source you share. If that doesn't change the way we formally or informally teach and learn, then it's not better, it's just faster. And so I think that if we aim it better, AI is going to give us a lot of opportunities to really up our game.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I love that notebook tool. Isn't that cool? That
Yeah,
podcast
super
feature is really great.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add 2 short things because I think it's already been touched on. I think both of them touched on it really well, but just the same way Megan said she checks over her work, we could use it for that, for QM for our reviews, to check, make sure our tone is correct, the intention behind what we're saying. I mean, she said from a student perspective, but listen, as faculty members, we should have that growth mindset too. We could stand to improve, so we can use it, in that standpoint, and also to review what we're submitting for course reviews as well. So I think it's a tool that we can use, like you said, to enhance what we're already doing well. We just aren't going to get it to that optimal level, is the way I view it.
Yeah.
Definitely. Any other comments?
Well, Deb and Brenda and others and I have had this conversation now for several months, so I'm not telling any tales out of school, but and they heard me say this earlier today. I think, I just returned from EDUCAUSE a couple weeks ago. And again, I apologize for people who heard this earlier, but what I saw, the evidence that I saw returning from that conference is that most of the institutions, certainly the major players, the powerhouses, the ASUs and the Penns and those types of places, Michigan, they're all developing and spinning up internally facing chatbots. This is the direction that they're all going very clearly. And I even talked to one of the developers at Michigan who built a tool there called Maisie, which integrates into their Canvas system. And that's the direction that they're going. And I've had some experience with that using an ISTE, if you're familiar with K-12 ISTE. I was piloting a product called Stretch, which is an internally facing tool as well. I think at the end of the day, I hate to prognosticate because I'm always wrong, but I think that we're probably ultimately at the end of the day, organizations such as Quality Matters and others, OLC, are probably going to build custom chatbots that are internally facing so they can control the training data. And it's not, you don't have intellectual property just floating all over the ether, which is what we're very concerned about. You don't want to be putting faculty content in a course review into one of these I wouldn't, into these large language models because they're using it as their training data. If you could control that, if you could internally base that product so that you have some gateways, and then the data can even be distilled down to the institution. So it's not just Quality Matters writ large, but it could be maybe bifurcated or something. It could be broken down by institution. And they could sort of control their own training data, as it were, and upload their own content and have some modicum of control over that. Personally, I think that's probably where, from what I saw from EDUCAUSE, that's where things are definitely headed in that direction. How those smaller institutions like us, like me, can do that remains to be seen because we don't have the horsepower to do that type of thing. We don't have programmers to do that like Michigan does. So it's probably going to require, a sort of a public-private partnership sort of thing for the development of those tools. That's what I suspect.
Great. Any other comments there? I'd love to ask the panelists too, just in a word, what will be the impact of AI in education in the next 2 years?
One word?
One word. It's difficult.
Transformative.
Oh, no, you got to go to them first. I got to
Sure.
think about it.
Okay. I've got to think for a second.
I've never said something in one word in my life. I fear chaotic.
Hmm.
Great.
Okay, you got to come back to me. Got to think about that for a second. One word.
I'll help fill some time. And Jason, when I said transformative, I didn't necessarily say positive transformation. I just said transformation. That was the key.
Duly noted.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I really like his analogy about the internet, because I'm a millennial and I just remember dial-up. And I wouldn't have paid money to know that we would have Wi-Fi and have connectivity everywhere that we go. So it's really hard to kind of quantify that and think about. But I really think that's what, especially generative AI, because just like a year ago is really when this thing, went off.
Yeah.
So, and look where we are. That's all we talk about now.
Right.
Megan stole the best word, transformative. I'm sorry. You're such a
I
good.
have an English background, and so I'm my own language model, of
What you
course.
can't see is in my mind, I'm running through Bloom's taxonomy up here. I'm trying to pick out a good verb. I really,
We should do that as an example. If somebody in the crowd wants to just ask Chat GPT what it thinks, we'd be really curious to know.
I got it.
Very self-referral question of
really,
ChatGPT.
honestly, that's a good point. Maybe, is there somebody that'd like to volunteer a transformative, back here in the back? Please. What do you mean?
I talked about that.
This is a really good point. I'm really glad you said that because I wanted to just brush on that real quick. In some of the conversations I've been hearing at the conference, which are all very important and just wonderful, the concern that I have is the equity and access. Are you going to require students to use these tools, in the fulfillment of an assignment, when some of the students don't have access to the same quality of tool? Maybe some of them have the paid versions or whatever. Yeah, how do you balance that disparity? Right?
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And not only is our
Maybe
students, our
disproportionate
institutions.
is-
Yeah. I would add a quick note to that. I've started seeing an increasing number of folks on LinkedIn in the teaching space that are talking about it's been really hard to try to create universal application of these tools in classrooms because of the free versus paid. But as much as I agree that we need better access to better models for students, I think asking for this to be free or no cost is a vast mistake, because that's where we got to. That's how we got today on the internet, right? One of the reasons why we have such a data privacy problem in the United States is because we didn't come to terms with the mass sale of our private data on an open market, and AI is that seemingly times 10. And I don't know where this goes, but I do think that if your institution isn't planning on a major expense to provide an industrial level AI tool to your students so that they don't have to rely on the free pieces, then I think that needs to be a part of your immediate future. And again, I know no one has money for brand new infrastructure needs, but I think it may be as important as internet access. And it turns into very much a digital divide if at the very least our institutions can't provide that for students.
Great thought. More than one word, but yes.
Oh, I thought that
I'm joking.
thought we were not doing one words anymore.
Hey, guys.
Did you ever get an answer?
I did. I asked ChatGPT, and of course, Megan got this. Maybe it heard Megan through the ether, but transformative was the answer. Well,
And that-
it was its answer.
And that's why Rob is right that we have to control it before it controls us with these internal facing chatbots. Oh,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah. His intern must be different than yours. What do you have, Penny? Oh.
Insightful. Was humble one of the words I came up with?
Very good.
That's great. Well, not to leave you empty-handed, we actually have a QR code here for some takeaways. So something for you to get started with in AI. Maybe one of you would like to explain what this QR code is about.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just, I alluded to this earlier. I think a lot of institutions really want to be at the forefront of AI. I think there's some fear around AI, and not just in its usage, but of maybe getting left behind with another new tool or technology. And so for those of you who maybe just aren't sure where to start, maybe you're overwhelmed, maybe there's too many silo projects going on at your institution, you need to find some cohesion. This is a great document to show you some things to consider. So looking at that political landscape and vetting some tools, experimenting and exploring. We all need to stay current with our knowledge and know what's out there. and experiment with that. And then, going about creating committees or just casual groups. Some institutions might want to have some very formal committees. Other institutions might just want to really start playing with it a little bit casually under the radar. Maybe it's going to be an effort that's, on an instructional design team instead of an executive or middle leader initiative. And so how you can go about testing those things, experimenting, putting together those committees, and starting to work more efficiently with AI.
Great. We have a couple of minutes for questions if anybody wanted to ask a question of the panel.
Panelists, not to correct you guys, but the IEEE proposed AI standards to be adopted by the current administration, only to find that they've already adopted their own. So there is an AI standards that was pushed out from the current administration.
Yeah, you
as-
talking about
as
the
of
executive
October
order.
24.
Yes. But how is that being implemented right now? The executive order from Biden?
Another question?
Tara.
Okay. I know I can talk pretty loud, like I can yell like a champ. Okay, so I'm an instructional designer. I am literally working on a graduate level data ethics class focused on AI. In every meeting I have with this faculty member, all they tell me is everything that students submit is generated. And so his concern speaks to, I believe, what Jason said, I think that's his name earlier, about we're losing the ability to teach our students to critically think because they generate everything. And when I mean, he says generates everything, I mean generates everything, whether it's images, podcasts, paper, it doesn't matter for him. It's all generated. That's his attitude. So what recommendations do you have to work within that framework of this faculty member saying, well, all they're going to do is generate everything anyway, when he is concerned about critical thinking, while at the same time trying to teach data ethics around AI? So I'm kind of struggling with that because my lack of knowledge of AI, number one, but then number two, he's pretty forceful in his beliefs, that it's just, all they're going to do is cheat. And even if it's helpful, they're not learning how to critically think, so it's not really helpful. And this is coming from a data scientist. So I am looking for advice, frankly, on how I can work through this process with him for this because it's a graduate level course for a data science certificate. It's the last course they take. Any advice would be very appreciated.
Jason, I'm not sure if you want to jump in since this was directed towards some of your comments, but what I would say from my vantage point is that I think a good way to start building good relationships with individuals is always looking at that common goal. So your goal and their goal is going to be supporting student success and ensuring that students are getting, the learning that they're paying to get. And likewise, I think you can have shared challenges. So it doesn't have to be your vantage point versus his vantage point versus what students are doing. I think you can just make it a common challenge and, really meet each other in the middle and talk about how can we face this challenge together. It might be that you need to adopt more of this in your actual steps for your activities and your assessments. So again, showing your work, right? So if this particular individual can see the challenge and you can provide some solutions for this challenge, it might be a good starting point for a conversation.
I think one of the things if one of our jobs as faculty and instructional designers is to think about how we can meet students where they are. And if that's what they're doing, then how do we help them learn that lesson still with them doing that work? And so you can grade the prompts they use, make them turn those in. You can have them revise what they wrote. You can have them compare, do in-class writing to answer the same prompt and then compare the two. I mean, because they used generated content to address an assignment doesn't necessarily mean they cheated. I mean, if you stated that they couldn't do that, then it is. But to talk through why they did it and then to examine the results of that still provides lots of learning activities and learning opportunities, I think. So I think your professor has to realize that the sands are shifting and he needs to be ready, that he can't just reuse his same assignments again all the time.
Yeah.
I that's harsh maybe, but I do think that part of our job is to meet students where they are.
Unfortunately, I think this conversation is going to be harsh a bit as we start to dig into it, but I'd have two additional thoughts. That's a great answer. Both of those were great answers. I would add to that, first, we're probably going to have to start looking at things entirely from the science of learning and look at what truly is a learning activity and what is not, and determine where AI can be a part of that learning process without sacrificing learning. Like, we don't assign essays in high school about the Great Gatsby because we really need 150 hot takes on the Great Gatsby, right? We assign it because it's a critical thinking exercise. Now, could that assignment receive some updates perhaps, or look at the critical thinking differently, right? Other ways to critically think, sure. But, suggesting that AI can write, so great, no more writing, woohoo, seems very, very, very short-sighted to me. But I would also say too that everyone that wants to just block this and then stick their head in the sand and hope it blows up, or blows away, is going to find it blowing up, right? And part of that is because that, and this is less towards your graduate students and more towards teens and those that are still working on frontal lobe development. But when you when you just ban a tool, right, that has an extremely useful application to people's daily lives, it's sitting on your phone now, right? You don't have to, it will come and tap you on the shoulder and say it's available to do this, this, or that. I think we risk making it really hard for kids to make good decisions, right? When students are are using AI because they are genuinely stuck on brainstorming, or they don't know how to organize something, or the classic explain it like I'm five prompt, which I've seen smart people ask. Well, I like to think I'm relatively bright, and I had it explain string theory to me a couple of weeks ago, which I did not understand. I'm a history teacher by training. And it was interesting, right? And helped me understand something else that I was reading. So I think really blanket approaches to just say, nope, we're not going to do it because AI is gross, is going to make the problem that much worse.
Great point.
Can I ask a question real quick? I know we're short on time, but these guys are my peeps. How many of you, by show of hands, that work with faculty, course development, that sort of thing, how many of you are concerned? How many of you think that AI is going to help your faculty build a better course? Wow. Okay. That's impressive. That wasn't quite the response I thought we would get. So rather than the human iterative process of going through and building learning objectives, let the AI tool build it. Is that a fair assumption? Okay, interesting. Do you think that's going to, how will that then impact downstream into a quality course review?
Roxana, we have to go. I know our time is up.
Make it hot. Okay. I don't think that it comes down to the AI actually generating that content, but helping the instructors to refine it, right? So if we have challenges with objectives being measurable, the AI can help them make those objectives measurable, right? And so in those instances, if, for some of us as IDs, we're thinking about time, that's something where the AI is serving as the intern, that's helping them to think through that before they get to us. And then we can then further have a deeper conversation with them about what it is they're setting their course up to be. And I think that also can help the instructors connect to what students will be able to do with generative AI, because if they can see how it's useful to them for creating a course where it's like, no, you are the subject matter expert, you know all of the content, you're just using AI to help you make it packaged for your students. They can see how students are able to use their own mental capacity to create knowledge. The AI is just helping them to refine what it is they're doing, which is also why I would like your instructor friend to show his work. Because if it's this assumption that everything is generated, sir, how you know that? How you know that?
And that's where we're stuck. Oh, sorry. That's where we're stuck because I've recommended all the things. We've talked about using, incorporating it into the work itself, into the assignments. We're going to have actually synchronous discussions about before and afters and all of these things. But for whatever reason, he's still stuck on the AI is the death of critical thinking, which, as Jason said, maybe isn't as critical and widespread as we think. But that's his attitude. So I'm having to deal with that inner philosophy from that faculty member. And that's what's tough because he's literally the one that's supposed to be teaching the data ethics class, but you feel like all you students cheat. So it's a tricky slope. It's one of the trickiest slopes I've been in with a faculty member before. So
And again, these are
Thank
hard
you.
discussions, but my answer to
Yes.
that would be then great, let's sit down, tell me where the critical thinking is specifically in these exercises. And I'd be willing to bet that, and I think this is true K through higher ed, that a lot of the stuff that people label critical thinking isn't really critical thinking, right? And again, everyone thinks they're a critical thinker, but we have plenty of evidence to suggest that people of all education levels oftentimes are not. And that's part of these community conversations. Again, these are not going to be easy, and people will be throwing chairs at some point, I assume. But those are the kind of hard conversations I think we need to have.
Well, thank you, everybody, for showing up. I know some of us have to go and catch a plane, but this has been really fantastic, and I think that's a great way to conclude with this really fascinating case study. So thank you all for joining, and please give some appreciation for our panelists.